Getting through COVID was an accomplishment inside itself. There was so much uncertainty, which obviously amplified making those decisions even harder. I mean, the first thing that people cut is things that they don't need, and what they don't need is custom apparel a lot of times. So we saw a huge decline. Since inception, COVID was the first time we took a loss. It's like, how can we keep our team members employed? How can we keep them engaged? How can we keep our culture intact? It was immensely challenging, both from a mental standpoint. I think that was one of the hardest years for me personally.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of the Mayn Idea Podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Brendan Pape. A quick reminder that if you enjoy this podcast, please take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. This helps the show get discovered organically and will allow me to continually bring on incredible guests. You can also support the show by subscribing to the YouTube channel or checking out our sponsors in the show notes. Brendan Pape is CEO of Brist Manufacturing, an industry disruptor that encourages brands to rethink the power of customer merchandise and provide them the resources to approach it with a results-driven strategy. Despite being birthed from a college dorm room, Brist was recently named to Inc. magazine's top 5,000 fastest growing companies in America. I appreciate Brendan's transparency in his story of navigating the challenges and successes of building a multi-million-dollar brand. Hopefully you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Without further ado, Brendan Pape. You started this company in the dorms, which is a place a lot of college ideas and business ideas grow. But you were also recently named to Inc. magazine's fastest growing companies, which is a phenomenal achievement, of any ilk. Can you talk to me a little bit about what it felt like to find out that you were nominated for that, and maybe reflect on the contrast of those two things happening in your life?
Totally. So this is actually the second time we've been nominated, second time we've been in Inc. magazine, and both times, I mean, it's definitely been kind of an over-the-moon experience. Starting something in a college dorm room, graduating to the garage stage, and then to the warehouse stage. It's kind of one of those things that, if you rewind back to kind of that moment in your life, I don't think there's, in a million years I would expect that I would be where I am today with the organization. So absolute, honor and privilege, and it's a testament to the hard work of, our team. So definitely a great feeling for sure.
So one thing that I love talking to real entrepreneurs about, people that have actually you've created something and brought it, along with your partner, and then also just the amazing people at your business. Something that was in your head now exists in the world, and it's a product that people can utilize. It's changing experiences across the board. You're actually taking apparel, which historically people just kind of bundle together, and you throw it in here's your goodie bag, and here's a shirt you'll never wear, or here's a hat that no one likes, and it just accumulates in people's closets. Everyone has a shirt or a wire backpack or something that they've gotten in that situation. You guys are making really cool stuff that actually you would almost just wear if you were going to buy something right at the store. That's the quality, that's the design. Was there a moment in your career, maybe from college through to now, where you really felt like, oh wow, we do have something here? This is not just another t-shirt company.
Absolutely. And that realization is really what brought us to Brist. So we began as a private label clothing brand that sold all throughout the West Coast in Zoomies locations. So we sold in surf shops. We're outdoor kind of inspired clothing brand. And in the creation of that brand, we learned a ton about apparel manufacturing, sourcing, importing goods, creative tech packing, all the needs to run a successful clothing brand. And as we would kind of go to trade shows, especially, product trade shows like Outdoor Retailer, for example, you see all these different product brands, and you're leaving these shows, and at the end of the day, you see all this apparel, this, branded apparel in trash cans. And it was kind of that point where we realized, hey, we know how to manufacture apparel. We know how to help brands and businesses to think like an apparel brand. Why don't we offer, these services to them? So fast forward to today, 5 years ago, we pivoted from a B2C brand to Brist, which is all B2B. And our goal is to provide, our customers all the necessary tools to really think like an apparel brand and emulate, the stuff that they're really excited about that they find in their favorite like retail locations. And that is kind of, our huge differentiator when you think about us within the marketplace. You have the promotional product brands that, are the quantity over quality. And then you have Brisk that's, really trying to help these organizations create impactful stuff that's going to resonate with their loyalists, their team members, and, also be kind of a retail piece.
How do you manage that gas pedal on, like, maybe it's growth, maybe it's more when you look at a business that's growing like yours, and you do something like decide to go from business to consumer straight to take on something entirely different, like an entirely different environment, an entirely different way of having to go about the business, different value propositions that you're bringing to the table. What is that, like the timeline like there? How do you digest the fact that maybe it's going to take a little bit longer to get to where you want to go if you want to do it right, so that you keep your brand integrity? Because I feel like that's something that you see a lot. It's like a company will grow fast, or they'll grow outside of their scope, but they do it at the cost of their quality, or they do it at the cost of their actual identity at the core of what that company does, what they're about, and the feel that you get when you use their product or wear their product. So how do you scale that and like I said, kind of keep your foot on the gas pedal at the right spot?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to have a well-defined mission and vision. You have to have a well-defined, organizational values, because ultimately that's what you'll come back to. Those principles are going to help you make decisions and make sure that you're, staying within kind of the scope that you want to be. And without those principles, it's easy to make decisions that aren't, best for the organization, or, will be well reflective of, ultimately what you're setting out to do. And there's been many, many times when something will come up, an opportunity will come up. There's, tons of opportunities, and it's like, do I want to be an opportunist, or do I want to really try to set forth a firm direction and be recognized as this, quality, apparel manufacturer? And, there's been many times where we've had to say no to opportunities, even though they would have been really lucrative and, the profits would have been there. It just didn't align with the cultural values of the organization. And I think that really helps us stay on track. And without those well-defined, values, it's hard to make, good decisions. And as long as everyone else is aligned with those values, we're all on the same page.
How do you make a decision like that? And I'm assuming that it's not one that you're making in a silo by yourself, right? You're consulting with people at this point and talking about how to go through it. But what is like the thing that helps you most decide how to actually navigate that? Because money's on the
Um,
table,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And you're a
totally.
business, so it's like,
And it really depends on the opportunity, and then we bring in, the stakeholders that are a part of it. Recently, we had a big opportunity with an organization, and we brought in our COO and our director of supply chain. And at the end of the day, you want to give autonomy to the people that are working within those specific roles. So you kind of open up that playbook again, and it's like, okay,
yeah,
this is what we stand for. Do you think this aligns? And does this align given the circumstances that we're seeing within, the economic environment? Sales are down. Should we be taking on this opportunity? And collectively, we can then make a decision. And when everyone, all the stakeholders are on the same page and that decision is made collectively, then it's like go time and everyone's okay with it. But, when I've made decisions without looping in, the stakeholders, that's usually when there's kind of friction, because then it takes, the empowerment and the autonomy away from them. So I think making sure that you bring in the appropriate parties and really kind of list out, all the pros and cons of the situation and open up that playbook. I think from there it's, much easier to make decisions on behalf of the organization that, will help push the business forward.
so I think that this question fits well because you are a unique entrepreneur and that you've built this by yourself, bringing on new roles of different people as the size of the business warrants the acquisition, right? To help bring on decision makers
Hmm.
and people that maybe understand a version of the scale that you're not there yet, or
Hmm.
still in the mindset of growing this out of a college dorm. So as you go through that process, I'm always curious how you manage that relationship with yourself as being at the beginning you're the you're the marketing team, you're the sales team, you're the designer, you're the manufacturer, you do everything. The entire vertical is performed by you and your co-founder, but you have to learn how to unwear hats, right? So how do you teach yourself, and do you ever catch yourself kind of dropping back into that, go, this is my company, it's my creation, I'm going to step in here and think this way. Wait a second, that's not really the MO here anymore. Like, how does that change through the life cycle basically of the scaling?
I think that's one of the hardest things, at least for me, one of my hardest things, for the longest time was, I was in the way. We would hire great
Yeah.
people that were way smarter than me to, manage these functions of the organization that I was obviously passionate about because I did it once upon a time and I wanted to continue to do it, or wanted to, see it done a specific way. And one day a mentor, we were kind of, talking about this, and she said, Brennan, 70% done to your standards is better than you doing it because you have better things to do. And that was kind of a
Yeah.
light bulb moment for me where, I need to really empower my team to make these decisions. And I mean, you bring up a point, a really great point. When you start something, you do everything. And then there's those different, layers of growth where, you then hire, new people to do specific things. And I think the biggest thing to, be creating a successful organization is being able to delegate, being able to step back, letting people fail. I think, failure is such an important thing. Without it, you don't have success.
Yeah.
And high-fiving them, when they do fail, so it's not, thought of as, a negative thing. And I think, that was a really hard learning, for me. For the longest time, I was in the way because it's, for me, I was like, well, then where's my value? And my value,
Yeah.
I realize it today, is getting above it, looking, well, into the future and helping kind of navigate the ship and really making sure that everyone's on the same page, communicating, that work's visible, and that, the cultural values, are still being, thought of, as top of mind, across the organization.
It's interesting to think about that because you are the business. Like if you just pulled Brendan out of the office for a week, you embody all the values of Brist, probably inherently, because it's your
Hmm.
child. This is what you've wanted to bring into the world. And so they're intrinsic, and it's got to be so hard to turn that off, to let someone else do something with, in reality, will be more productive. It will
Hmm.
be better. And then in addition to that, what I always find interesting with this is by letting people do what they want to do and trusting in them,
Hmm.
you build integrity into the organization itself, which is not something that can happen if you're always the decision maker. Because then
Hmm.
the feeling that you have of not feeling like you have a role, you're stripping the role out from everybody else. So why would they want to pour their heart and soul and give all their creative energy and everything into it when you give the freedom and the, I don't know, it's got to be a lot like, we don't have a kid yet, but it's got to be a lot like parenting. Like, you let your
Yeah.
kid bash his knee into the ground skateboarding, then you can get down on your knee and be like, hey, so what happened? What do we think about skateboarding without knee pads? They're like, I don't know. I got blood all over my leg now. I don't know if I like that too much. It's like, cool. Let's talk about a way that we can fix that or something. And so it becomes this positive kind of fail forward mentality. Is that still very much in the vein of the ethos at Brist across all teams?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, today our team is, I think I could step away from the organization today and I would be confident the organization could continue to move forward. And I think that's one of the most important things of any leader and any manager. It's, you don't want to work yourself into the organization where the organization can't function without you. You want to create, an environment, build processes and systems that can function without you. And, for the longest time, we had a lot of management and leaders, including myself, work ourselves into the organization. Over the last 2 years, that's changed. And we've hired a new level of leadership that understands the importance of building processes and systems that work without them and then moving up in the organization. Because that ceiling, continues to ultimately grow as the business continues to scale. And, across the organization, people are open to, continuing to, open to failing and open to taking chances. And, one of our kind of core values is sending it. We want people to send it. And
Yeah.
in doing that, you're going to learn a lot, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But the most important part is you can take that learning, you can analyze it, and you can draw conclusions from it and continue to move forward.
You mentioned earlier that you work with a mentor, and I'm always interested to hear when that started in your life.
That started my life probably when the business was 2 or 3 years old, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like what the heck is going on here? Just complete improv.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate in college to also be a part of kind of another venture that was um, that was run by angel investors. And through that program, I was introduced to a bunch of people that had been there and done that. And I gained a lot of great kind of mentors from that, and it was awesome to have the opportunity, to sit down with them and be like, hey, this is kind of what I'm dealing with today, or what are your thoughts on this, or just ask questions and soak up their wisdom. And there were times when I listened and it worked out great, and there was other times when I didn't listen, and then I learned, 2 years later I should have listened.
Right.
But yeah, I think mentorship is such an important thing, and it's definitely interesting because it's these people they don't have a ton of time, so it's
Right.
how can I utilize them and also try to add value. And um some of my mentors today, they continue to be great friends, and we'll meet on sometimes a biannual basis or quarterly basis or even like a monthly basis. I'll just hit them up and we'll talk for an hour and check in. I'll be like, what are you up to these days? And, they'll tell me. And I think just having those conversations with like-minded people is just super, super helpful. Even if they're, kind of someone in the same kind of growth stage as you, I think it's super, super helpful just to kind of go through the founder process and, what are your challenges? What are those roadblocks?
Totally.
And it's very insightful to kind of learn from people who have been there and done that and are also on their journey as well.
Sometimes just getting a perspective that's outside of your own scope is, I mean, that alone can be a game changer. It's a breath of fresh air that you just don't get when
Hmm.
you're a workhorse because you'll
Hmm.
do it yourself over and
Totally.
over.
Totally. And sometimes you got those horse blinders on,
Yeah.
and, meeting with, mentors and like-minded people kind of helps, create, you know, help you see through things through a different lens, which is
What do you
critical.
feel like was the biggest departure in the growth of your business from you being at the helm to like that initial recognition that, okay, this is growing at a rate that's beyond my abilities as an individual, and it's time to start bringing on talent that maybe sees things from an angle that I'm not considering or has experience in an area where I'm not, because I feel like that's a hard transition for people to manage just in general. One, from a resources standpoint, you recognize that bringing someone new on, right? If I wanted to hire a producer for the show,
Hmm.
that's a lot of resources that I have to now give out
Hmm.
to someone to do that, because you don't want the quality to be stifled by the fact that you're not willing to pay that much for them or something. So when you're looking to bring people on and grow something, that's a very big decision. How did you make those choices?
I think it was recognizing that without bringing critical people on, we would not be able to continue to hit the growth trajectory that I was hoping for. Our growth would be stunted because we couldn't set the foundation to ultimately support our sales. And it definitely came, when the realization came when things started to happen and boil up, where we were having issues with, different processes and systems that we couldn't get our arms around it. And we couldn't
Yeah.
get our arms around because we didn't have the right experience in place. And, I think Good to Great is a phenomenal book that kind of
Mm-hmm.
really opens up your eyes. You need the right people in the right seats on the bus.
Yeah.
And without those right people, it's so hard to continue to grow. And having something that was bootstrapped, started in a dorm room for the first 5 years, or 4 years, everyone was green. Everyone was green.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we started hiring experience and being open to paying, market rate for people that have been there and been successful, at past organizations to bring on that we really saw, the foundation and the infrastructure be set in place that could actually keep up with the growth on the sales side of things. And I think that's where we are today. Since 2019, we've really invested, really tried to heavily invest in making sure we have the right people on the bus so we can continue to sustain it, so we could continue to sustain the growth that we had projected.
What is that timeline like? From 5 years, it's not just you in a dorm room 5 years, that would be an extra year at college, right? But you're growing this in a dorm room. What is that initial growth phase like? What kind of people are you surrounding yourself with? And then what were those initial next steps? Because the jump, like I said, from manufacturing in a dorm room to being one of the fastest growing companies in the country, that's like a very big transition. So what were those kind of like those skipping stones of different moments between there and now, in
I
terms
think
of maybe specifically to personnel?
that's a great question. I think it comes in different phases. So for probably the first 2 years, phase one, that was, first 2 years, $0 to $2 million, and everyone was green. It was friends. We were bootstrapping. Everyone was wearing a lot of hats. And then from $2 to $5 million, it's like, okay, we need, some greater leadership in certain areas so we can continue to grow and scale. And then from five to, you know, $10 million, that was a whole nother level of growth where it's like, okay, we really need people that are experienced to be able to do stuff. Otherwise, it's just pure brute force needed from so many different people to try to figure out how to get it done. And then from 10 to $15 million, it's, I think it just amplifies. It's all about the
Yeah.
people at that point. Because without the systems and the processes, when you're doing that volume, it's so hard to continue to support the growth. And that's kind of where we are today. It's, how can we get from, 14 to 20? And it's that next layer of leadership really that we're going to continue to invest in to try to get to that point. And we have a great, a great layer of leadership now. So it's bringing those people up and then continuing to add, another layer of leadership underneath them or people that are side by side them so we can continue to expedite that growth and fill in the gaps that, are ultimately the challenges that are holding us back, which right now, the big thing that's holding us back is, some of the systems and the processes. And for me, having full visibility of, you know, what do our sales analytics look like? What is our contribution margin down to the product level? And without that information, it's hard for me to drive, the
Right.
ship. It's like you have a dirty windshield. So it's putting those
Right.
processes and systems in place so
Yeah.
I can see clearly and communicate, strategy across the organization to help, continue to drive us forward.
It's interesting. I think of this is a horrible comparison, but it makes total sense. Like when you watch a puppy grow, the puppy grows, its body grows in different spots. So like its hind legs will grow more than its front legs, and it just kind of does this until it's a full grown dog. And I'm sure that it's got to be difficult to allocate resources to the right place as you develop your sales protocol, then you develop your marketing protocol, then you have maybe quality control issues. You want to make sure that the product's really good. But
Mm-hmm.
every time that you focus on one thing, it takes your attention away from another.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting to hear you talk, even at like about just kind of like monetary levels, of different quantities of revenue that just change the game in terms of how you guys operate your business. Because when I hear that, I think of, okay, how many people just kind of starting their business would be just over the roof if they did $1 million in revenue in a year? Just like absolutely
Mm-hmm.
over the roof. When you were going out of the dorm room and then starting to hit these markers or at least go towards them, was there any kind of satisfaction with that? Or were you always looking to the next level? It's like, no, I know that this can be something so much bigger than what we're doing.
Yes, there's definitely, the total stoke, when you hit those kind of or those top line revenue growth metrics. And for me, I think this is definitely a fault. I need to slow down and celebrate those moments and be excited about those moments because, 2 years ago, I don't think I would have expected us to be where we are today. But I'm definitely someone that is like, let's continue to drive forward. Let's continue to grow at a similar pace or more? How can we continue to grow our market share? Because, when I look at Brist today, we're just getting started. We're completely,
For sure.
we've grown out of retained earnings. We have minimal debt. And, having gone and gotten my MBA and had the great mentors that I, do today, it's like there's a ton of areas where we can optimize and continue to throw, fuel on the fire and really expedite that growth trend. So, yes, I mean, I'm always really excited looking back, and kind of seeing where we've come. Um, and I think that's also the hard part. It's making sure you take the time to celebrate with the team all those accomplishments. And when I do look
Yeah.
back, I think there's definitely been opportunities where I should have done a better job at doing that, because there's so much hard work that has gone into the growth, up to this point.
Well, awareness is such a hard thing to teach, but sometimes you only get it through your own experience. Like
Hmm.
even to be able to look back on that and realize that like that's something that you wish that you had improved upon at these different moments of achievement. Now you get to make that decision going forward for every other moment of achievement. And maybe looking back, if you didn't have that forward pushing mindset, do you get to where you are today or not? Like you never get that
Hmm.
back, to
Hmm.
see like maybe sometimes the hard-headedness and that focus is the thing that brings you to where you're at,
Hmm.
but
Totally.
you never really get that unless you could go back,
Yep.
when you guys first grew to, let's say, a level where you started to change around your sea level,
Hmm.
how far outside or did you stay within your industry for that when you were bringing people on?
We stayed within kind of the CPG space. So a little bit outside our space, like we didn't have any kind of executive levels come in that were specific to, private label apparel manufacturers, but we did have people that, you know, our COO, she has a ton of experience with, direct to consumer brands, and, that were private label manufacturing. So she was on kind of more the hard product side of things in an outdoor space. And our CFO right now, he's got a ton of experience, with kind of the similar industry as her. He worked for a bunch of different private equity firms and, also consumer product space. So that definitely helped, those two. And then, for the more specific role, supply chain director, she had specific apparel experience, apparel manufacturing for a big brand before she kind of, began working for Brist. So I mean, it's hard. Ideally, at the end of the day, when we're hiring sales reps and stuff like that, I want people with experience within our space, because then
Right.
they can hit the ground and they can, start running so much faster than if you get someone completely green. When it comes to, same thing with kind of a designer, having an apparel designer, or someone that understands, how apparel works and, how it, lends itself to kind of the manufacturing process, I think is super, super critical. But then, there are some other functions that you can afford to have people, well outside of that, the market, and bring them in and have them be successful.
How did you know you wanted to get into apparel? Like what was the initial genesis for you guys even starting this in the first place?
So the original co-founder and I, we wanted to create cool branded apparel that, would be sold in surf and outdoor shops that would resonate with us. We were big kind of snowboarders and surfers and mountain bikers, and, would really try to kind of foster a community. And I mean, at the time, we had no intent on this being something that would employ us after college. It was literally just supposed to be a hobby. We were supposed to be doing it for fun, and then him and I were both supposed to enter, the corporate world after we had
Right.
graduated. And, once we came to the point of graduation, it was like this crossroads. It's like, okay, do we fold this up, or do we try to continue to send it and move forward and try to create this something into something that can sustain us?
And was it
And
at that point it was generating enough revenue to support you guys independently or like nowhere close?
w- barely enough. I mean,
Somewhere in the middle.
yeah, when you come out of college, you're just
Yeah.
used to, being a complete dirtbag and can live off of,
Yes.
nothing.
Ramen
And
noodles. Yeah.
exactly. So that's what we did for probably 2 to 3 years after, college. We just lived off of basically nothing and
Yeah.
continued to pour money into, retain earnings and continue to kind of grow out of, existing cash flows. And because we reinvested so much in the early days, I think that's what really helped contribute to, our growth in the kind of those early days and helped kind of obviously sustain it.
So you're just taking everything and pretty much cutting out enough for you guys to survive on like a college mindset,
Yep.
diet and lifestyle, and then putting everything right back in there.
Yep. Yep. Until probably about, yeah, like 4 years into it, then it was like, okay, now we can take, you know, a decent salary and, have the luxury of owners and take kind of draws throughout the year, when it worked. But, those early days were definitely, rough. I remember I ended up actually buying my business partner out in 2018, but I remember for a while there, he had gotten married while we were doing this, and he would be on Craigslist looking for the side hustles and how to make, continue to make money outside of this so we can make ends meet. I went to Alaska for a summer and fished for 3 months to try to make enough money so I could continue to keep myself afloat while we continue to drive the bus
That's
forward
my
right out of college.
my sister does that up in Alaska.
Oh, nice.
It's actually
That's
interesting. I
awesome.
saw that you had like walked the docks up in Bellingham to get a spot on one of the boats for the summer. But I mean, as you know, as listeners might not, you can make a whack of cash in like 3 months. So if you're a
Yeah.
fresh out of college student, you can come out of the summer with basically zero expenses while you're working because you're on a
Hmm.
ship, you got food, you don't want to be paying rent somewhere that you're not. And so you come out of that with like 10, 15 grand.
Hmm.
That's huge for a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, right? So when you came
Yep.
back from that, were you like, okay, I got this cash, I can survive long enough
Hmm.
to pour some heart and soul into this thing? Or were you like, maybe I'll just pocket that and go back to school or go into the corporate world and just like get an actual real job?
When I came back, I was like, this is gonna float me for 6 months to a year, and we're gonna continue to drive this forward. I mean, that was one of the big things, with my business partner at the time. It's like, hey, if I go to Alaska, will you continue to run this? And then when I get back, we'll continue to move this thing forward for the next year. And that was kind of an agreement that we made. Unfortunately, the season was good in Alaska, so I was gone for 3 months, came back with enough to keep me afloat for, a little less than a year. And, that helped because at the time at that point we were making even less, hardly anything to survive. So we needed to supplement income in other ways, and that was the way that I did it.
Do you think you could do that in your 30s?
That's something that I think about all the time, man. I'm like, man, if I were to do this over again, no way. There's no way. There's zero, I think zero chance that I could do that in this. I would have to, we'd have to finance growth out of debt or,
Yeah.
you know, VC, get funds to try to grow an organization. And I think it'd be really hard, especially, being 33 years old. I think it'd be so stinking hard to try to start something with zero income, because at,
Do you
the
think
first,
you could do it with, I mean, it's hard because you have the experience of someone who's grown the business to where it is. So in a way you have like a cheat code here, but do you feel like that you could do it by taking on debt and investment to start something? Like, is it the bootstrappiness, eating ramen noodles, like not sure where the next paycheck's going to come from, part that's stressful, but that's at a time when like you're figuring relationships out, you're young and you're an idiot and like you don't have much going on that is really like at risk. Whereas now life's a little bit more stable. You have the people in your close circle that really mean a lot to you, and you don't want to put yourself outside of the comfort zone. Like, what do you think is the biggest differentiating factor between your willingness to get it done then and go about it by any means necessary and the hesitance to like want to take that on in your, if you were to do it again in your 30s?
I think it would just be harder because I mean, unless I took out, a loan to live off of, I think it would be really, really challenging if it, but I think there's so many different instruments now to fund a business. And, what I know now, I would, if I were to start something completely different today, I would want to start a venture-backed, high growth organization. And yes, it would still be kind of bootstrapped in the sense that, I wouldn't have, the salary, the income level that I have now, but it would have the backing to propel the organization forward at a much faster rate than, Brist has been, launched forward because we've grown out of retained earnings. So
Right.
I think, having something that's venture backed, you can hire the appropriate people, the best people out the gate to make get the organization to meet kind of those growth expectations so much faster than growing organically. And that's one of the things that I tell friends that are starting businesses now, depending on kind of the business, it's you can go super, super slow and grow at a bootstrapped, rate, or you can take on investment and grow much faster. Sure, you have to give up equity, but you can get to market faster. You can be potentially a market leader quicker. And I think now that's so much more valuable, depending on what you're doing,
For
obviously,
sure.
than taking the bootstrapped kind of growth rate. And I mean, look at all the organizations that have gotten big over the last 2 to 3 years. It's like they've gotten big for a reason. They're likely venture
Like
backed.
Vori, that's a
Yeah,
great example, right?
they're.
Those guys are
And what's crazy is I met Joe back in probably 2013 or 14. He was in a 10 by 10 booth at a trade show that we were also exhibiting at, going the bootstrap,
I love it.
route. And if he
Yeah.
would have continued to go, pave a way forward with, the similar mentality he had with that we had with Brist, he would be, you know, he would have, up $20 million, something like that.
Right.
But since he, poured a ton of fuel on the fire, he has $1 billion company. And I think
Yeah.
if you have a vision and a position that, fits you in the market, I think that's definitely the best route to go.
How do you do with comparison?
Like comparing me to like a different organization or comparing, what do you mean?
Yeah, and when you look at where your career is and the successes that you've had and all the sacrifices that you've made along the way to get there, and I feel like in any career, whether it's an entrepreneurial venture or a professional venture, there's always a fence right next to you that you can look over and be like, oh wow, this person's company is valued at that, or like, geez, they did it with 100 less employees, or they didn't take on capital, or they did this, that, or the other thing. As a driven person, how do you manage that?
That's a great question. I think that's one of the innate things, that we humans struggle with is we always want more. The grass is always greener. We're always trying to get to
Yeah,
that next thing. We're always comparing ourselves to all these different people. Instagram does not make it easy, you know.
the
And I
worst.
think, yeah, exactly. It's like, how the heck did this person get from there to
So bad,
there?
so
And
bad.
I think it definitely helps create drive. I I think, at times you can definitely let it get to you. But I think at the end of the day, you have to reflect on where you came from. And if you can reflect on kind of where
Mm,
you came from and everything that you've learned up to this point, you should be super satisfied, with that trajectory. And, I look back on Briss, and I think there's a zillion different things that we could have done. But I made the decisions that I made for a reason. And that brought us to where we are today. And I need to be okay with that and
right.
excited about that and not look at the past as, something that I'm frustrated with, but look at it as a successful point that brings me to kind of where I am today, and is ultimately paving where I'm going in the future, and kind of where I'm going in the future is also one of those things that is definitely affected by some of the things that I see. So it's like,
Right.
how did these people do this and that? Should I be doing these things? Should I be tweaking these knobs? So I think I think comparing yourself is important, right? It keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, I've always felt this way. I think that if you look to any competitive sport, right, there's if you look at like the most celebrated athlete in a given
Hmm.
discipline, other people are vying for that spot, and that does two
Hmm.
things. It keeps you sharp as the contender that you
Hmm.
want a spot on the team. So you're going to show up to practice early and you're going to try really hard and you're going to improve your skill set, and you might stay late and you might just try to be around the environment where you can see that stuff. But then to the top performer, it holds them to another standard too, and it pushes them individually sometimes to a fault, to where there's mental breakdown, or they can't actually withstand the pressure. But that relationship does drive performance kind of
Mm-hmm.
across the board, like the rising tide raises all ships type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But managing that on an individual level is really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I know I can only kind of speak for myself here, but like it's so easy to compare and forget to find the value in it, that like you're
Mm-hmm.
comparing for a purpose. Like, okay, I'm recognizing that this company, they did a phenomenal job getting their supply chain managed or getting these products out. I want to emulate that in my business, versus like, oh my god, they figured out, and here we are, we have 15 shipping crates that are stuck in XYZ, and my whole bottom line's fucked, and like now I'm just upset, and this sucks, and my business isn't as good. Like those are two choices that you face as an athlete, an entrepreneur, whatever discipline that you're in across the board. It's tough to manage that. It's tough to have
Mm-hmm.
a healthy relationship with yourself and the other people in your industry.
Totally. And like to your point, I mean, you got to look at it as a tool to make you better, not,
Yeah.
you know, bring you down. And I think it's easy sometimes to get discouraged, but if you look at it as a point to help move you forward and create that drive and light a fire under your ass, I think, comparing yourself is great.
How did you guys manage COVID?
Oh, COVID was such a challenge.
I mean,
I mean,
on
the
your
first,
business resume, is there something better than like you navigating that, keeping your company together, and then thriving on the other side of it? I just feel like that's like your, your deployments basically that you come back from.
yeah, it was getting through COVID was an accomplishment inside itself. It was a very, I mean, as for every organization, and like it was a challenging time. You had to act fast, you had to make quick decisions. There was so much uncertainty, which obviously amplified making those decisions even harder.
Totally.
I mean, the first thing that people cut is things that they don't need, and what they don't need is custom apparel a lot of times. So we
Yeah.
saw a huge decline. Since inception, COVID was the first time we took a loss.
Okay.
And, that was challenging for me, not, because we had never taken, a loss. And it's like, how can we keep our team members employed? How can we keep them engaged? How can we keep our culture intact? It was immensely challenging, both from a mental standpoint. I think that was one of the hardest years for me personally and professionally, is getting through that, and trying to keep the team morale up. And looking into 2021, we definitely saw a lot of residual effects on a cultural basis because of the
Yeah.
challenges that we had running through 2020.
Did that push you to make any changes within your organization?
Yeah. In 2021, I mean, we had offices up in a little north of Seattle. Everyone's remote now, except like our production team.
Wow.
And so the remote environment's weird. I mean, I think there's a huge positive, because I think people are really productive, working at home, and I think it also opens up the talent pool. Now you
For
can
sure. Yeah. You're
hire
not stuck
someone
to a
that's
location.
exactly. So I think there's a huge benefit to that. Additionally, in 2021, we saw morale from a cultural standpoint was down, so we deployed 4-day work weeks. So
Huge.
today we have 4-day work weeks for our entire team. And at the time I was like, is this gonna work? Are we like, how are we gonna be productive for 4 days? We're missing a Friday. That doesn't make sense to me. But we ended
Right.
up testing it out. Fast forward to today, we're up 67% on the year, which is
Wow.
awesome. And I think, I mean, I would love to see more owners and operators kind of do that for their business, because I think it empowers their team to enjoy other important things in life. There's so much more than work, and
Yeah.
having that third day, a 3-day weekend every weekend, I think is so great for family time, pursuing passions, pursuing your side hustles, whatever that may be. And I think that's really elevated our culture a ton, and also helped us, attract new talent.
For sure. I get inspired when I hear that, because I think that, you are our generation is the wave of new entrepreneurs and business owners that are going to be decision makers in the long term, right? Like you will be voters and decision makers within the corporate space and big contributors to work-life balance, work-life culture.
Hmm.
We already saw a big shift in terms of just like work-life balance and benefits, right? Trying to make the
Hmm.
workplace more enjoyable, having communal workspace versus just siloed cubicles. Like there's been a lot of changes happening over the years, but it's cool to hear that that's something that as a CEO excites you, right? That
Hmm.
you can think about the big business picture of growing and revenue and profits and margins, but then also recognize that on the human level, there's a ton of creative people that are making the gears work. And if you
Hmm.
look to Australia, if you look to other countries, traveling around, like whenever you meet someone who gets a couple months off a year, it's just
Yeah.
like, what? I can't even what do you mean? You don't, how does anything ever work ever? And
Hmm.
not that it always does, but it's that recognition that people need to live their life too. And when
Hmm.
you get to, you're motivated most of the time, right? You're
Yep.
stoked. You're like, you know what? I don't even know Brendan that well, but he's the CEO of my company and the dude cares about me, and that's rad. And so when I go to
Hmm.
work, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be stoked to be there and put in all my creative energy because they see me as a person, not just like a number on an Excel sheet that's like, marketing employee 1, 2, 3, do
Hmm.
your job or you'll get fired. Like we got to get away from that.
Totally. I mean, people are the most important part. Without creating and fueling the passion for them, it's really hard to move forward. The profit, you can't have profits, without them. You can't have that top line revenue growth without them. And that's definitely been, a much larger focus of ours over the last couple of years is figuring out how we can continue to make Brist a space that people enjoy.
Yeah.
And it is, challenging, especially with people working remote. It's how can we break down those barriers? How can we get teams to engage a little bit more? But I think, my hope is we can continue to challenge that status quo and do different things that are really meaningful, for the people that work for the organization.
What was like the initial growing pain there with going virtual? Because like you said, there's some major upsides to this. The talent thing being the easiest to digest, that you can acquire someone in a place that you don't even live. They don't have to be able to walk to the office. That's a
Hmm.
major plus because you can really get the cream of the crop in terms of thinking ability and creative ability. So you do lose that tangible in person.
Hmm.
How do those feel in the workplace for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge was collaboration. It's getting cross-functional teams to communicate and collaborate on a regular basis, even when things aren't, you know, going wrong. Because at the end of the day, when do, different departments, collaborate? It's usually when there's a problem. It's like, hey, we got to fix something.
Right.
But trying to encourage them to also collaborate and communicate when there isn't a problem,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
share those wins. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges. With a small organization, we have 55 people. Prior to COVID, everyone was in the same building. So you're high-fiving every day. You're, having a conversation at the cooler and getting to know each other on a more personal level. And now that everyone's remote, you don't have that time. It's like you have a video call and then you sign off at the end of that video call. It's not, a lot of times there isn't that small talk. So that's been, kind of a hurdle that we've been, challenged with. So it's, trying to get people to communicate and have meetings together to share those wins.
I did I ran the fitness component for this offsite for a company from Brazil, but they're global, and they had 6,000 employees that had never met each other. And so they did this
Uh-huh.
offsite in Mexico and had a 3 day experience of all these different things. But they brought
Hmm.
every department together in their company that could make it. And just being there as a fly on the wall, it was really interesting seeing the difference that people just kind of embody when they're face to face. Because these are
Hmm.
people that have worked together successfully, right? Grown this
Hmm.
company to new heights under their leadership, had never met their CEO, got to meet him for the first time, had never met their teammates, got to meet them for the first time. And just seeing that like excitement and the power of people being together in the same place, it was like palpable. And I have
Hmm.
not had many experiences contrasted against something like a pandemic where you actually go and see that. So I can
Hmm.
only imagine that when people do get together, that it's really special. It's incredible that they're able to be so productive across the board without that. Do
Hmm.
you ever worry that as the business continues to scale and gets to new levels that you'll have to maybe think about this a little bit, how to create more in-person and team experiences with the growth?
Yeah, absolutely. So we bring our entire team together about 2 times a year. And,
Oh,
one of the big
cool.
reasons is to kind of your point is, it's important for them to have a couple days, a few days to kind of really get to know each other, solve problems collectively and in person. So we just had one back in May. We'll have another one at the end of the year for kind of our holiday party. We're having a strategic planning meeting for 2023 and at the beginning of October, where we'll fly in all of our leadership. And that'll be kind of a 3 day facilitated meeting to kind of drive, strategy for the next 2 to 3 years. So I think getting them in the same room is really, really important. And that's definitely something that we're trying to encourage, our team, even when we don't have, organizational, like organization sanctioned events, they can come out to
Right.
our plant whenever they want. So it's kind of open invite, and everyone has kind of a budget for that. So, but I think yeah, getting them together is critical. And I mean, 2 times a year is at the end of the day isn't enough. I wish we could do it more
Right,
often, but
right.
it's challenging with people's schedules and stuff like that.
This is, I mean, quite a departure from what we've been talking about, but I'm just super curious. Uh, when I look at and touch Brist's stuff, it's super good. Like it's the quality is very, very on. And when I think about that compared to anytime I've come into contact with like just a branded product, like, hey, this is our company, here's a water bottle, or this is our company, here's a shirt. And I see this a lot with martial arts community, like going around to
Hmm.
different jujitsu gyms all over the world. Everyone brands their gym, right? So you have like
Hmm.
blah blah jujitsu academy, and they'll have their logo and they'll have their shirt. It sucks. Like the
Hmm.
bottom line is that it's bad quality, and the apparel itself is not cool, and that's a
Hmm.
super hard thing to get right. How do you make something cool just intrinsically? Like I see it, and you just know exactly how it makes you feel, and it Brist has just knocked it out of the park. And with that, I wonder, have you ever been tempted to like deviate from the wholesaling aspect and actually just like have your brand be a brand beyond representing Briss as the product?
Absolutely. I mean, that's always been kind of a conversation. Should we relaunch, the private label that we had, originally launched? One of the reasons why we haven't is, I don't want it to compete with kind of that main,
Yep.
vision. I mean, we are an organization already has, oftentimes a lot of competing initiatives, but that's definitely always been on the top of mind. We did launch a blank brand called Brisk Blanks in
Mm-hmm.
May, and that is to allow other embellishers, potential competitors to leverage our blank headwear and brand it themselves.
Yep.
So that is kind of a component of, us, offshooting kind of another brand. But yes, there's definitely a lot of team members that are like, oh, let's sell Brisk stuff. And at the end of the day, I think we could definitely do it successfully. We have all the resources in house to do that. But my big fear is that that is competing with, some of our larger objectives, which are going to slow that momentum
Right.
down.
Yeah, I cannot. Just thinking out loud, like that does present a little bit of an issue with you guys, right? Because if you are making your own branded line, then you're really competing with people that are making branded stuff for people to go out and wear. But I don't know
Hmm.
how. So
Yeah.
how do you think about that, like from big picture for yourself? Like here's a, an opportunity to run the entire thing in house, basically, right? It becomes potentially super cost effective because the quality is so high already. Your design teams are phenomenal. The
Hmm.
branding and just like in general, even when you go on the website, like the feel that you get from the website is not like you're going to Auto Hats and you're trying to design a hat. Like you guys, everything feels from all the different touch points that you possess like it's super high quality. So to think that it would be anything less than that if it was a standalone just doesn't make sense. I'm sure you guys would hit a home run there too. How do you, as the CEO, manage the temptation?
I think the temptation, I think it's just down, like, comes down to the opportunity cost. It's like what are the resources that it's going to take to get something like this off the ground?
Right.
Where are those resources going to come from? Ultimately, they're going to take away from some other initiatives. I don't think it would necessarily compete with our customers because when you think about it, it's like we're making hats for Liquid Death, we're making
That's
products for
true.
Solomon.
Yeah.
So it's like all these brands are so unique that usually their consumers are attracted to them for a reason. It may compete with, brands, in whatever market that we're trying to really attract. But my big thing is just, how can we reduce, it's like the art of subtraction almost. How can we do
Hmm.
less and focus on those core, few big things and really drive the ship forward? Because I think sometimes it's easy to get diluted by opportunity. And for a while there, we were getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because we were trying to manufacture products that were outside of our scope. And then, our creative team was distracted by, trying to figure out how to design all these different products. And our supply chain was distracted by figuring out how to source and work with factories that could manufacture all these different products. And we got so wide that, when it came to the apparel component, those things were moving slower. And when we
Yeah.
began to kind of reel things back in, the apparel component started to grow at a much quicker rate. And I think that's always, the struggle for entrepreneurs. It's usually, usually in the early days, you want to say yes to a lot of things so you can drive revenue and growth. But as you kind of mature, it's really trying to hone in on, the core functions of the organization, what truly makes you different, and, the core things that help you compete against, obviously the big competitors. And that's why we're really trying to hone in on private label apparel that's sustainably made, that emulates stuff that you'd find in, a retail setting.
When you were growing this company, at what point did you establish a clear mission statement? And then once you did that, did it maintain throughout the next stages of growth, or is that something that you refine?
It's been refined. And because it's been refined because of, the emergent strategies. We began as a private label, B2C company, and through that we had one mission statement, and then ultimately as we kind of continue to grow, this other opportunity emerged, and we recognized, hey, this is a bigger problem that we can solve. And then a new strategy emerged, and with that new strategy came a new mission statement. I would say every 2 years, year and a half, we kind of reassess our mission, because of the emergent strategies. So that's one of the big exercises that we're going to be going through in October is, is our mission statement in alignment with what we're really achieving right now, or do we need to make some
Right.
small small tweaks? Ultimately, it's kind of been within the same realm after the pivot, but it does, we do tweak it on a, annual basis if there's big things that need to be kind of adjusted that don't align
I,
anymore.
I always like when I become like attached to a brand, when I just find myself buying their stuff or consuming their content, whatever it is, to
Hmm.
go and read that because it's really interesting. You find that successful businesses do fall very close to their mission statement.
Hmm.
It's just a couple words, right? It's a just a paragraph, but
Hmm.
like designing those with intention and then holding true to that really does seem to shift the quality and the consistency of whatever is being done. That's why I was curious if it shifted a lot, but it makes total sense that you would change it. Do you ever feel like it directed you in the wrong direction?
No, our mission statement mostly has been kind of on track. So one of our big objectives over the last 2 years has been to move all of our programs to have a sustainable story. And that's kind of this buzzword, so it can mean so many different things. But at the end of the day, textile apparel manufacturing is the second biggest pollutant to oil. We recognize that. So how can we try to do better as an organization? And 2 years ago, we put an initiative in place. It was we want to move all of our programs to have sustainable composition. So like the shirt that I'm wearing right here is made out of recycled polyester. So today all of our programs really have that. But one thing that's kind of missing from our mission statement is nowhere in our mission statement does it say sustainability or have, any sort of, correlation with the objective going green and trying to be a more mindful organization for the planet. And that's going to be something that I think we're going to need to add to our mission statement because now, based off of products, if we can't create a product that has a sustainability story, we don't create it at all. So it's
I
I
love
just
that.
it helps make a decision. But yet, and ultimately, we should be referencing our playbook, our values and our mission to be able to make that decision. So it should definitely be added either into the values or into the mission statement.
Again, it just kind of it motivates me. It's exciting to hear that these things. A couple other entrepreneurs or business owners that I've spoken to, it just is cool to see that everyone is thinking about this. That sustainability or like it's actually driving your decision making process. That's insane. If you really think about that, like if you think back to businesses that you've been around just for your life as a human, as a consumer, companies that were staples through our childhood, I'd be pretty confident to bet that a large majority of them were not making actual financial decisions based on whether or not what they were doing was like good for Earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's intertwined into what you're actually doing is, of course, you touched on it, right? You already recognize your space in that textiles, by and large, are a big contributor. So knowing that in the first place is important, but that's actually been internalized, not just noted, but you actually feel that, and you guys are making choices around that. How do you keep that as the textile company just makes more textiles, right? Because you have to have a growth strategy. You want to get bigger. You want to get into more markets. You want to get into more countries. Does that become more and more and more of an effort relative to the scale of your business?
Continuing to go down the sustainable path,
Yeah.
or yes, in my opinion, our one of the big strategies is to be recognized as that sustainable producer. If when you think of custom apparel, you can think of Brist as, the organization that offers, products that have a sustainable story. And we want that, that needs to be encompassed across all of our products. Whereas most of our competitors, they do it for some of the product lines, but not all the product lines. And
That's so
we,
interesting to me. That's like making it's like when some food company does like an organic line, but you're
mhm,
like, hey, if we look at your farms from a macro view, you have like a little corner chunked off to do like organic, but you're still part of the massive issue.
yeah, and it's not authentic. And our
Not
goals
at
to be
all.
authentic with that. So what that's
Right.
going to mean is there's going to be customers that are going to come to us and want things at a
Yep.
price that wouldn't lend itself to sustainability, and that's when we have to say no. You know,
Yeah.
we have to say no to those opportunities, and that's something that we're okay doing because this is, eventually going to be a value of the business or a part of the mission statement. That is that driving force. So the goal is to attract organizations that care about it. And at the end of
Yeah.
the day, you can't be everything to everyone. The moment you try to is the moment that you're going to
Totally.
be on a decline. So we chose the path that has been authentic to us, really since the beginning. And, we didn't have a sustainable story 5 years ago, but what we were doing was trying to create quality merchandise that wouldn't end up in a landfill and giving
Right.
all of our customers the tools to do that. It wasn't sustainable in terms of compositions, but it was sustainable in the sense of craftsmanship, and the longevity of the products that we were creating. And we recognized that. So we're like, how can we take it a step further? And that's when we
Right.
began introducing the sustainability components in terms of composition.
That's an interesting part about it too, though, is if you look at your position now to be a leader within the space as a sustainable first company, it goes back to that like hindsight's 2020, like you can only connect the dots looking backwards. Is do you get to a place where you get to be a leader in the sustainability movement for textiles if you don't have the growth strategy in the beginning that didn't allow for it? Because let's say that you go back to the very beginning and you're like, everything's 100% sustainable. We're saying no to anything that's on the outside of that. What if that approach actually shoots you in the foot in your growth, and then you never get to be in a place where you can make these big scale decisions that, I mean, if we're being honest, let's say that Brist grows at a rate relatively consistent with how you've done so far and keeps doing that, and you maintain this sustainable approach. Now we're talking about actually impacting the textile industry with
Mm-hmm.
garments, right? That's an invaluable win for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we, like, you can't guarantee that happens if the company doesn't even exist.
Totally. But I mean, and that's what we're projecting. I mean, we're projecting that this is, and I mean, back to kind of, who we are as an organization and what we're trying to do is, we're trying to help people really embrace the power of custom apparel. And I think this is a necessary thing for us to continue to propel ourselves forward and create further differentiation from our competitors. And, rewinding 5 years ago, there's no way 10 years ago we couldn't have started with just creating sustainability, products that have, sustainable compositions, organic cotton, recycled polyester. And the reason was because the timing then, it wasn't right. Factories weren't ready for that. So I think
Yeah.
timing is such, an important component to decision making. Whereas 2 years ago, we recognized, okay, things are getting up to the speed. We're really pushing this initiative on our factories and they're responding to it and accepting it. And now we can, really roll this out, across all of our programs and be successful with it. So, it's all about timing, but I think that this is, a critical driver for Brist's success moving forward.
When you think about textiles and apparel in general, can Brist grow to a place where you could do, like Nike apparel or something like that? To me, when I don't know anything about the industry, but I think about these two places being like maybe really far apart, maybe further apart than they are.
Hmm.
But how do you get to that level, maintaining something like a sustainability approach and being really true to that, but getting to a global impact level?
Totally. And I think it's continuing to focus on those key drivers, supply chains, compliance to really be able to work with those big customers that we're working with Disney right now.
It's
And,
huge.
we have to have all these things in place to be able to work with, a corporation like that. We've made hats for Solomon. We've made, we're working on a project for, what's the name? Like Urban Outfitters. One of the brands that we're working with wants to sell into Urban. So, we're well on our way. I don't know about like an organization like Nike that has a ton of
Right.
that stuff set up, but, we've had Black Diamond Equipment, come to us and want to, run their logo wear through Brist in the past. And I think, as we continue to grow and really focus on that infrastructure, we'll be able to support those organizations. And I think that's, one of the most important things for Brist looking in the future is continuing to focus on operations.
Hmm.
Because if we have operations that sound, we're going to be able to support the sales growth. Because we have such a high demand for our products, but oftentimes, you know, our sales are well ahead of kind of the operations, and that's
Hmm.
where we're really trying to hone in and focus on, acquiring talent to really continue to build that infrastructure that can support that sales growth and work with customers like you're mentioning.
Did you always think you could get here to be
No.
landing apparel deals with Black Diamond and Solomon and about to be an Urban Outfitters? Like these all seem go back to business school, right? I don't maybe you even have, but you're the guy that they're bringing in to tell you about what business is like in the real world and what it's like to run a successful company and all this stuff. What was that ever even a like in your brain that you could grow this thing to where it is?
No, definitely not. I think that's what's really exciting. But I think now, over the last few years, it's like, okay, these are the opportunities and these are the, where we can grow and devising a strategy that's going to link up with kind of those growth opportunities. But, 5 years ago, if you would ask me, do you think you're working with Disney or do you think you're going to, make hats for Solomon? I'd be like, yeah, right. There's no way in hell we're going to be focusing on, small mid-market customers.
Right.
So, and that's what's really exciting. I think that's what gets me excited about waking up in the morning and going to work and working with the people that I get to work with because they're making, all this stuff possible.
If we go back to the beginning and think about the trade show days and the bootstrap days, how many times did you want to quit?
For me, quitting wasn't really an option. I
Yeah.
I am someone that I think, and I don't know, I tell friends this all the time. You can be successful at anything that you set off to do if you have that drive and determination. Like, you can do anything, but it's ultimately up to
Facts.
up to you. And, you know, Briss went through its ups and its downs, and we had, the tenacity and grit to recognize that it's part of the process. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
someone that wants, a quick, get rich quick scheme or doesn't want to put in the work, you're likely not going to get there. But if you're someone that has that drive and is focused, I think you can do whatever you want. But it takes drive, it takes action,
Yeah.
and it takes execution. And I think if you can take that first step and keep that momentum, you can really accomplish anything. So, throughout the process, it wasn't, I don't think I ever wanted to quit. There's definitely countless times where I felt defeated, deflated,
Yeah.
uh, personally and professionally, tail between the legs. But I don't think there was a single time that I was like, I'm done. I'm going to quit. Definitely times where I felt very burnt out, but quitting has never really kind of been an option.
What was the closest? the, the closest moment you had to being like, you know what, I'm a smart guy. This is not the right decision. I need to just go and put my skills to work in the like corporate world.
Probably COVID. Um,
Yeah.
probably COVID because going into 2020 that was kind of a pivotal year for me as a leader. Like, okay, I need to hire the right people. I need to get out of the way, and I need to empower people to do things. And then suddenly I was sucked back in because of COVID, and needing to make all these decisions, already feeling extremely burnt out and not super confident. So I think that was a year like, God damn, man, this is
Yeah.
hard, and I mean, there are those times where I look at the amount of work that I do and the relationships that it has taken away, and it's like I need to find, a different balance. But I think COVID was probably the closest, made me think about it maybe for a minute. And then sometimes, when some of those big setbacks, you're always like, damn it, maybe it would be easier to have a job where I can clock in and clock out, and actually have a life because it doesn't turn off. And I think I have so much empathy for, any entrepreneur or business owner because if you aren't one, you fully don't understand it. It doesn't end. It never ends.
No.
And I think that is such a challenging
Yeah.
thing. But also, I think that's one of, the most exciting things because you're building something. It's you're not just getting paid in a salary, but you're building something, and that equity is an asset. And I think it's really really cool to see what you can accomplish. And looking to the future and kind of my future path forward. If at any point Brist comes to a conclusion, I would want to start something different. I feel like I'm an entrepreneur at
That's my
heart, or
next question.
I'd want to be a part of or a part of a venture backed organization, helping it grow as kind of a key leader.
It is an interesting trait. The more that I've talked to entrepreneurs and then just my like running my training business separate from when I actually like pulled the trigger and left Equinox, which was driven by the pandemic. I'd wanted to leave for a long time, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back and really was a catalyst like pushed me out to do my own thing. And you're so right. Like it, whatever the scale is of your business, whether you're running a multifaceted large company like Brist or a smaller training business, you deal with these weird constant conversations with yourself about what you're doing that are just like an underlying theme of running your own thing because
Hmm.
in when you're in certain growth phases no one's going to tell you to work harder or no one's going to tell you to do this or to do that, so you have to have this weird and internal desire to just do it anyway.
Hmm.
And sometimes you don't know if that's the right thing. And it's a very psychologically tormenting experience to go through. But on the flip side of it, the long term reward potential is insane.
Hmm.
And then you control to a very unique degree your life,
Hmm.
right? Because no one's holding, and maybe this isn't true for your role now because of where the company is at, but no one's holding a candle to you
Hmm.
telling you what you can't go surf right now, or
Mm-hmm.
you have to do this, you have to do that. You get to make all those choices by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that every choice has an opportunity cost, because if you choose to go surfing, that's maybe a business meeting that you could have had with a manufacturer. And sometimes you make the choice to go surfing because you know it's good for you, you know it's going to benefit your mental health and how you are. But it never stops. You never get to wake up and not think about exactly where your business is at, like that day.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Totally.
And it's a trip, but it's also inspiring, and it's really cool to see everything that you've done over at Brist and everything that you guys are doing. What is on your horizon?
So I just finished up my MBA in the spring. So I'm trying to take, a lot of those learnings and apply it to Brist. We want to continue to focus on achieving a similar growth trajectory that we've had over the last, 4 years, which is, like 30% year over year growth, which includes, the pandemic. So without the pandemic, it's probably about a 52% growth. So continuing to grow, hire the right people, and disrupt the industry and really be recognized as that premium apparel manufacturer and catch the eyes, some of those big dogs. So super excited. I think there's a lot of great opportunity for us, and yeah, excited to continue to learn, throughout the journey.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I would love to do this again in the future, as it parallels your growth and different areas that you're going to with your business. But it's really cool to see, like I said, that just the way that you're thinking about your company, it's very inspiring. The sustainability elements, the concern for your workforce, and the respect for the creativity and the skills that they possess. I think it's a very cool, humble view. So I'm hopeful for like corporations out there, if more people like yourself are out there building them. So thank you for taking the time to do this, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it, Dave.